Welcome back to another episode of the ICIS Energy Foresight podcast. It's a special episode, end of the year episode, and we're going to do a retro of the main events of 2024, trying to understand the impact that they had on the energy market, and also obviously look at what's going to happen or what might happen in 2025. And for this, I'm glad to have a special guest, Laurent Nery. Laurent is the head of global market analysis at Engie, and he oversees a team of 40 experts that cover a broad range of commodities from oil to gas, power, emissions, and coal across many geographies, so Europe, the US, and Asia. Welcome, Laurent.
Hello, Matteo. Thank you for inviting me.
So it's a pleasure. I think that the right place to start is if you can tell us about a bit more about what you do and your activity, and what is Engie's GEMS, which you represent.
Sure. So GEMS stands for Global Energy Management and Sales. We play a crucial role in Engie's unified energy strategy, serving as the driving force behind the management and optimization of the group's assets. With the expertise spanning two core areas, asset and management optimization and client risk management and supply, GEMS ensures the efficient use of assets and the reliable delivery of energy. We are operating in 17 countries, and GEMS strengthens Engie's commitment to sustainable energy solutions, providing support for a secure energy future for clients worldwide. This dual expertise is essential to Engie's integrated model, reinforcing its leadership in the energy transition. And as market analysts, every day we are trying to understand how this energy transition is going to impact prices for the very short term, especially on power markets, but obviously as well for the longer term perspective.
It's an honor to have you here, and I have a lot of questions, especially when we when we look at what has been happening this year. And I think your coverage and the amount of things that you look at in terms of the platform that you have is quite astonishing and super useful for this conversation. But let's start from 2024, if you agree, and then we move to 2025. A lot has happened this year. Was a record year in terms of number of elections across the whole world. Geopolitics still dominating the scene, and is having an impact, obviously, on the energy market. But if you were to pick 2 or 3 main events or topics that were the ones that impacted your activity and GEMS activity, what would you pick?
So in terms of event on the energy markets, I guess at the beginning of the year, if you remember well, we had a strong decrease in wholesale prices. And it was the point where everyone realized that after 2 years of strong crisis in Europe, demand came down. Both European and gas demand were down. So for power demand, it's 7% less than the pre-crisis level in Europe, for instance. And for gas, we are talking about minus 20% down, removing the weather effects. So it was quite striking that at the end of February, I guess, we were a bit below 30 euros per megawatt hour for the TTF, for instance. And everyone was looking at this very high level of gas installed. Then 2 or 3 weeks later, we started to see a phenomenon that we already witnessed, which was the negative prices. But this year, it was coming from France. It was quite unusual because during this crisis in 2022, France heavily relied on electricity imports to cover for the nuclear production issues. And suddenly, in 2024, the power markets in Europe switched totally in terms of setup. And mainly because of hydro and renewable production in France, combined with strong nuclear recovery, suddenly we tested a bit the limits of the systems, of the power system in terms of exports. And we had so many discussions during the summer on those negative prices, what they mean for the producers, for the consumers. And the third element I would highlight is what happens since 4 weeks. We are now back into a situation where prices are quite high. For gas, we are, let's say, between 45 and 50 euros per megawatt hour on TTF, a bit higher for JKM. And on power prices, we have witnessed some days where the system, especially in Germany, was very tight to manage the famous Dunkelflaut situation, where you have very low renewables, but still strong demand to cover. So I think it's those three elements quite highlights the uncertainties around the price developments, the needs for agility for market participants, the need of flexibility for the system to manage those price developments. And regarding geopolitics, we have at the end of the year, let's say, a clearer picture, which will probably give us much more uncertainties in the coming years.
And that is really interesting, and I think that the natural question, Laurent, is obviously to start looking at 2025, and what do you see for the next year? More of the same, or are there any of these factors likely to play a smaller or bigger role next year?
Let's start with the European and LNG markets, because we have very high uncertainties, and especially on the renewal of the Ukraine transit or not. I think it's very difficult to make a bet. So I would wait for the beginning of the year. And with these stories as well, you can have a situation where there is an interruption, but then behind the scene negotiation and a deal afterwards. I guess that the consensus of the market is rather that those flows will stop. And indeed, the demand of LNG outside Europe grew quite significantly, and I think 2024 was the year where people realized as well that many countries need LNG to deal with their energy security and are ready to pay it quite high. And I'm thinking about Egypt, for instance. We saw as well that Brazil suddenly bought much more LNG because of droughts. So the demand worldwide for the LNG in 2025 will be key, but the supply will not grow a lot. And once again, we have uncertainties on the commissioning dates of several projects. But all in all, we will test probably in 2025 the first year where Europe has to compete with other players to attract LNG. And depending on the uncertainties on the Russian supply, on weather, I can see quite tensions in summer 25 to refill storages. And then we will need indeed to discuss maybe at the end of next year about 2026, because if ever for the first time Europe struggles to refill storages properly, this could indeed bring a lot more questions. So really this gas picture is quite important to monitor closely to see indeed if this scenario of the, what I say, tighter for longer materializes. Then on the power system, it's a bit the same. We removed quite of capacity in the European system. So Germany closed its nuclear units, removed some coal assets and put them into the reserve markets. But the margin is thinner. And it could create surprises as well, because during the winter times, it has been a while that we haven't a very extreme weather situation in Europe, very cold or cold and very low winds. And the situation in the power system changed quite drastically over the past 3 years. And depending on the demand recovery, we could see as well some extremes with some days with high power prices, but as soon as the wind blows, and we were talking a bit with the spread between Germany and France, and as soon as you have a lot of wind in Germany, you see that Germany can be back below the French power prices. So very, very important development that are transforming the European power market. And given it's very much more reliant on renewables, it means that you have to add the weather uncertainties to all the other level of uncertainties that we have, being geopolitics, being the gas supply or the gas demand recovery.
There is the matrix of risks is indeed much bigger right now. It's much larger compared to the past, and I think that is probably the beauty of our job is exactly to try to compose that matrix and understand how the intricacies of the different risks may play out, and what are the different factors that play a much or a bigger or a lower role across the different seasons and moments of the year. But I think it would be interesting to sit down again next year and see whether the different factors that we have here discussed have played out in one direction or the other. Last question for you, Laurent, is what are the big surprises that we might have in 2025, right? Rather than the risks, what might be like the one or two things that are not on the radar at the moment?
I think, given the complexity of the economic developments to forecast, especially with the Trump administration that will take office at the end of Jan, we can be ready to have very, very high surprises. But when it comes to the energy system, I think that's one of the biggest surprises, which will have a big impact, is the Saudi oil production, which is really making the efforts for OPEC Plus to underproduce, so to remove, I think, close to 3 million barrels per day of the market. A change in this perspective could really trigger strong reactions on the energy market. Generally, when Saudis change their minds, it's quite spectacular. So they did it in 2014, in 2020 during the COVID. But here it would be interesting knowing that, and I think that the speed of the energy transition in China needs to take a look, because the electrification of some of the sectors can indeed as well trigger some surprises on the level of oil demands. And over the past 2 months, I see the usual showdown between IEA and OPEC on the level of demand growth for oil. But I think it's something that would be very interesting to follow. And then the other market that can surprise, but maybe in the other ways, I think is India, with the demand growth and can be very fast and can as well change a bit the picture, especially for the LNG market.
Yeah, I think that this is I will agree 100%. The combination of oil and gas becoming a global market, and so not more a regional market as in the past. It's making the whole spectrum of analysis quite interesting and challenging, and I think it is an element of obviously pain for a lot of consumers that they struggle with getting the right information, getting the right interpretation of the different events. Laurent, thanks a lot. It was a pleasure, and again, I hope to have you again on the podcast next year to review the different elements of the market and look again at the future of the energy markets.
Thank you, Matteo. See you soon.